Next we are here to talk about the AWS Config. So it's a service to help you audit and record compliance of your AWS resources. And why? Because you can record the configuration and the changes to configuration of your resources over time. Now, when you define the rules to make sure that these resource configurations are compliant or not over time, so these rules are just here to evaluate compliance. So they are not here to prevent actions from happening on your resources. So for example, say you have a compliance rule to look at whether or not SSH is open on any of your security group. Because if you are not using SSH in your company, maybe using something like SSM Systems Manager. So in this case, if someone creates a change in your security group rule and allows SSH, the config rule does not prevent this from happening. There is no deny rule. This is a very good use case instead of for something like an SCP instead. What the config rule will be doing will be look at the compliance of your security group, and it will have a notification to your admins through your SNS topic. That yes, one of your security group had changed its that it's not compliant anymore, and you have to act upon it. Now there is some automation you can build, but remember, config rules are not here to prevent actions from happening. They are here to give you the compliance of your resources over time. Now, what types of questions can be solved by AWS config? For example, is there unrestricted SSH access to my security group? So, or do my buckets have any public access in any public access in a subnet, or yeah, or how has any ALB configuration, application load balancer configuration, changed over time? So maybe someone did make a mistake, and I want to backtrack that change. So you can receive a lot on SNS topics for any kind of changes, and it was a kind of thing in a per region service. So you need to enable it in every region where you need it to be. So also there is possibility to aggregate all the areas of config data across accounts in region into one central account, which is a very good use case for a security account where you have logging and config and so on. Now, config resources, you can view the compliance of a resource over time. So if someone if some rules apply to the resource, then you can see it's red when it's not compliant, and in as soon as you apply a rule, it becomes green and becomes compliant. You can view the resource configuration over time, so you can see when the changes happen and what changes happen. And finally, in case you have collateral API calls enabled, so you can view who made these changes and when the voice happened directly, when the choice happened directly from the AWS config, which is very handy. Finally, let's talk about the config rules. So they are here to help you evaluate the compliance of our resources, and you have over 75 AWS managed config rules. And there's more over time, but you can also make your own custom config rules, in which case you need to define them in the AWS Lambda. And for example, you can say, okay, I want to create a Lambda function to evaluate if its EVS disk is of type GP2, each EVS type of GP2, because maybe you have costing constants and you are in the dev environment, or maybe you want to evaluate if each EC2 instance is of type T2.micro, because you want to remain within the free trial or freeze here. Okay. So rules can also be evaluated and triggered for each conflict change. So whenever an EBS config will change, it will be triggered or regular at regular time interval. So if you want to rest assure that yes, your company's that's your resource is compliant over time, you can trigger CloudWatch events as well if a rule is not compliant. And then if the rule is not compliant, you can chain it with the CloudWatch events, and then CloudWatch event can, for example, trigger Lambda. That is a very good use case. Finally, rules can have something like called an auto remediation. Okay, so if a resource is not compliant, so you can trigger an auto remediation. And that remediation has to be defined through an SSM automation. And SSM automation have a lot of possibilities, including invoking limit functions. So it's possible for you to remediate non-compliance instances. For example, if an EC2 instance that is launched is not of type t2.micro, then automatically stop it or terminate it. Two more examples. For example, you want to remediate security group rules. So you'll want to remove the rules that are non-compliant. Or for example, in this instances must be started with some specific tag, and the tag is not found, then automatically stop these instances using an auto remediation. And all right, that's all you need to know for the AWS config at a high level, and this is all that we need for the exam. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture with AWS Managed Logs.